It was a crisp Monday morning in Washington, D.C. The White House press briefing room buzzed with tension as reporters gathered for what was expected to be a volatile exchange. President Donald Trump had just announced a federal funding freeze targeting programs deemed wasteful or politically weaponized, and the backlash was immediate. Standing at the podium, Karoline Leavitt, the sharp, composed, and unflinchingly loyal White House press secretary, faced the press like a soldier on the front lines. With her signature navy blue blazer and a no-nonsense tone, she launched into her prepared statement. President Trump is putting America first. This funding freeze is a constitutional check on runaway spending that benefits activist agendas, not American citizens. We are reviewing all federal grants and subsidies, especially those funneled through partisan programs. As the flashbulbs exploded and reporters yelled out questions, none stood out more than the murmur that began to circulate in the room. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, was filing for a restraining order to temporarily halt the freeze. A restraining order against the president's executive move? Karoline raised her eyebrows when asked about it. We're aware of Representative Ocasio-Cortez's theatrical legal move, filing a restraining order against a constitutionally elected president for executing his executive powers? That's not governance, that's a headline grab, she said coolly. The next few hours were a media frenzy. CNN ran the headline, AOC takes Trump to court over federal freeze. Fox News countered, Trump defends taxpayers, AOC files legal gimmick. Twitter, as always, erupted. But this wasn't just another political stunt. Behind closed doors, both women were preparing for a direct confrontation, each representing two opposing Americas. One saw the freeze as an attack on marginalized communities and climate justice funding. The other saw it as a stand for constitutional governance and fiscal responsibility. Meanwhile, in a glass-walled office in the Capitol, AOC stood surrounded by her legal advisors. Her hands moved animatedly as she laid out her strategy. If we allow this freeze to go unchecked, it's not just about the environment or education funding. It's about allowing a president to act without congressional oversight. This is authoritarianism dressed as reform. Outside the Beltway, ordinary Americans were just as divided. In Michigan, a single mother feared losing her housing subsidy. In Texas, a small business owner applauded the cutbacks that promised to lower taxes. Back in the West Wing, Karoline reviewed her notes for an upcoming primetime Fox News interview. She knew what was at stake. AOC's legal action sets a dangerous precedent, she told Chief of Staff Stephen Miller. If courts start micromanaging executive authority based on political preferences, then we've lost the very separation of powers the Constitution demands. Stephen nodded. This is going to get personal. Be ready. By Tuesday afternoon, the Capitol was electric with tension. AOC had just filed a temporary restraining order, TRO, in federal court in D.C., naming President Trump and the Office of Management and Budget as the defendants. Her aim? To block the implementation of the funding freeze until a full congressional hearing could review its legality. Standing outside the courthouse surrounded by microphones, AOC delivered a fiery statement. This administration cannot defund the future under the guise of fiscal responsibility. What's happening is not just a policy disagreement. It's a direct assault on the American people, especially the poor, the working class, and communities of color. Her words echoed across the nation. Progressive leaders like Senator Elizabeth Warren and Representative Ilhan Omar voiced support, while conservative pundits decried the move as legislative overreach through legal maneuvering. That night, Karoline Leavitt appeared on Tucker Carlson Tonight, the American flag gleaming in the background as she faced the camera with cool confidence. We don't govern by tweets or tantrums, Karoline said. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez is exploiting the judicial system to push a political agenda. But this White House will not be bullied by legal theater. The president's executive authority is clear. Tucker leaned forward. Do you believe the courts will side with her? They shouldn't, Karoline replied sharply. We have legal precedent and constitutional clarity. The president can pause discretionary spending for review. This isn't tyranny, it's leadership. Meanwhile, inside the White House, lawyers pored over historical case law. The Bush and Obama administrations had implemented similar freezes, but not under such intense political scrutiny. Back on the Hill, AOC was unshaken. Her office released a detailed breakdown of the programs impacted by the freeze: clean energy research, community healthcare clinics, minority business grants, after-school programs in low-income neighborhoods. The data painted a vivid picture, and it resonated. Protests erupted in several cities. Activists held signs that read, "Defunding hope," and "My future isn't optional." For every protester, however, there was a citizen like Ben Hollister, a truck driver from Ohio, who went viral with a YouTube video supporting the freeze. "I bust my back hauling freight 60 hours a week. I pay taxes. Why should my money go to these feel-good grants when our roads are full of potholes and my nephew can't get a job?" The clash had become more than political, it was cultural. Karoline and AOC had become avatars for two Americas. In the West Wing, Karoline met with White House counsel and President Trump himself. The president, never one to shy from conflict, was fired up. "She thinks she can beat us in court?" Trump said, slapping the table. "Good. Let her try. She'll make me stronger." "Karoline, you're doing great. Stay on offense." Karoline nodded. "Always, Mr. President." She stepped out of the Oval Office with her phone buzzing. It was a call from Fox News Sunday, inviting her for a solo interview. A chance to frame the narrative. She accepted immediately. At the same time, AOC was preparing to take the fight to the people. She announced a virtual town hall series to rally support for her legal action, titled, "Funding the Future: Why We Fight." The legal clock was ticking. The court had scheduled an emergency hearing for Friday, and both sides had begun mobilizing everything: lawyers, media, and public opinion. Friday morning in Washington, D.C. dawned under heavy clouds as if the weather itself anticipated the coming storm. Crowds had already gathered outside the E. Barrett Prettyman United States Courthouse by 7 a.m., media tents set up, protesters waving placards, and supporters of both sides chanting slogans. Inside courtroom 3B, the atmosphere was tense yet orderly. On one side, attorneys representing the Biden-appointed federal judge prepared to hear AOC's motion for a restraining order. On the other side, the Justice Department's legal team, backed by White House counsel, stood ready to defend the legality of the funding freeze. Sitting in the front row, Karoline Leavitt, clad in a sharp black dress and her signature pearls, kept a composed expression. She wasn't there to testify, but her presence was symbolic. She was the administration's face, the communicator-in-chief of Trump's second term. If the freeze was upheld, she'd be announcing it. If it failed, she'd take the heat. Across the aisle sat Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, flanked by her legal advisors. She wore a dark green blazer, the color of renewal, of money, of the programs she believed the freeze was unfairly targeting. The judge entered and silence fell. "We're here to consider Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez's motion for a temporary restraining order against the federal government's executive freeze on selected discretionary funding." Both legal teams launched into their arguments. AOC's attorney framed the move as a politically motivated overreach that violated the Appropriations Clause of the Constitution. He pointed out that Congress had already approved the funding, and freezing it without congressional consultation undermined legislative authority. The DOJ attorney fired back with a chilling rebuttal. The executive branch retains the right to review and delay disbursement of funds when concerns arise regarding efficiency, legality, or national interest. This is not an override of Congress, it's a pause for accountability. Karoline's eyes never left the judge's face. She was reading his reactions, analyzing his posture. She knew how much of politics happened not in policy papers, but in tone, body language, and perceived intent. AOC wasn't testifying, but when the hearing paused for a short recess, she stood outside with cameras rolling and delivered a powerful message. This freeze impacts the real lives of real Americans. If we allow the president to bypass congressional authority with the stroke of a pen, we're writing the obituary of checks and balances. Karoline, standing not far away, watched calmly. When approached by a journalist, she offered her own soundbite. The court ruling had barely settled into public consciousness when AOC took to social media with a fury rarely seen from the progressive firebrand. Her tweet had gone viral within minutes. "Today's ruling is a setback, but we'll keep fighting. We won't let this authoritarian administration strip away the future of working-class Americans. The freeze on vital funding isn't just a policy mistake, it's an attack on democracy itself. Her followers exploded into action. Thousands of #FreezeTheFreeze and #SaveTheFuture hashtags trended on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Protests in New York, Los Angeles, and Washington, D.C. erupted by nightfall. AOC's voice had turned into a rallying cry for the left, demanding more than just legal action. They wanted full-scale political mobilization. On the other side, Karoline Leavitt was monitoring the digital landscape with laser focus. Fox News, where she'd been a frequent guest, picked up the ruling as a major victory. "This is a win for the American taxpayer," Karoline declared on Hannity later that evening, her voice firm but unwavering. "The president's executive authority is intact, and today the court made it clear, this isn't a fight about principle. It's a fight over political gamesmanship." AOC's appeal to the courts is just another stunt to distract from the real issues. The Trump administration had won a legal battle, but it was clear that the political war was far from over. The following week, Karoline was thrust into the spotlight again. This time, she stood in front of the press corps addressing the fallout from the White House's decision to go on the offense. The president was planning to visit key battleground states to push his agenda, states like Ohio, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, places where the freeze's impact was being felt firsthand. But the press had other questions. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez just announced plans to bring this issue directly to the House Judiciary Committee. She's calling for a full investigation into your actions and questioning whether the freeze is even constitutional. How does the White House respond? Karoline leaned forward, a smirk playing on her lips. She wasn't rattled. She'd anticipated this line of questioning. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez can try to bring us to another round of hearings, but let's be clear, this is about holding the line on fiscal responsibility, not playing politics with taxpayer money. The freeze is an executive decision, it's legal, it's justified, and we'll defend it at every level. The media circled like sharks, hoping for a crack in Karoline's armor, but there was none. It was clear that she wasn't just defending the freeze, she was on the offensive playing chess while AOC's team seemed stuck in checkers. Meanwhile, in Congress, AOC was rallying her allies. She met with members of the Progressive Caucus, strategizing her next move. The House had already approved funding for programs like clean energy research and mental health services, programs she believed were being unfairly targeted by the freeze. This isn't about one person or one political party. This is about protecting the programs that serve real people, from the underprivileged communities to the climate activists trying to save our planet, she said, her voice tinged with passion. As AOC's base mobilized, it was clear that the confrontation was now a two-front battle, one in the courts and another in Congress. The White House was facing down a sustained political challenge that wasn't going to subside quietly. AOC's rhetoric had begun to take root. But Karoline wasn't backing down. The White House was circulating talking points across conservative media outlets, framing the freeze as a vital stand against wasteful government spending. Tucker Carlson had already invited her back on air, and now Karoline was preparing for a series of rallies in key states where the freeze was seen as a necessary corrective to out-of-control government expansion. The White House was mobilizing its grassroots. At the same time, AOC was doing the same, ensuring her supporters knew how to call their representatives and senators, pushing them to stand up for the American people's future. As the months passed, the clash between Karoline Leavitt and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez grew more heated, culminating in an intense televised debate that would determine the political fate of the funding freeze. The debate was scheduled for a primetime broadcast on one of the nation's leading cable networks, MSNBC, with millions of Americans expected to tune in. Karoline was briefed meticulously by the White House communications team, while AOC was preparing with her progressive allies, including prominent leaders like Senator Bernie Sanders and Representative Ilhan Omar. As the cameras rolled and the audience settled in, the tension in the studio was palpable. Karoline and AOC sat across from each other, their eyes locked in a silent contest of wills. The moderators introduced the topic: the impact of the Trump administration's federal funding freeze. The debate began, and AOC wasted no time in launching her attack. Let's be clear, folks. This freeze isn't about fiscal responsibility. It's about punishing the American people for the sake of political gain. We're talking about vital services, education, healthcare, infrastructure that affect the lives of everyday Americans. Karoline, You and your administration want to weaponize these issues to score political points. Karoline took a breath, her posture strong, her voice calm but assertive. What we're doing is far from a punishment, Alexandria. This freeze is about putting an end to wasteful government spending. It's about ensuring that taxpayer money goes to where it's truly needed. Your narrative of punishment doesn't hold up when you take a closer look at the inefficiencies and fraud in some of these programs. The president is standing up for the people who want better management of our resources. AOC's eyes narrowed, and she leaned forward. Better management? Or are we talking about an attempt to undermine the very programs that lift people out of poverty, that create jobs, that fight the climate crisis? You talk about fraud, but where's the evidence? We're in the middle of a crisis, and this freeze is just a political ploy. The crowd reacted, some cheering for AOC, others murmuring in agreement with Karoline's points. The debate was as much about policy as it was about public perception, and both women were in their element, defending their respective sides with passion. But Karoline knew she had to bring it home. This wasn't just about refuting AOC's arguments, it was about framing the narrative in a way that would resonate with the American people. Alexandria, you've spoken a lot about programs that help people, and that's important. But we also have to recognize the reality that the American people are asking for fiscal responsibility. They're asking for a government that doesn't spend without accountability. The freeze gives us time to review programs, cut out inefficiencies, and ensure that we're not wasting taxpayer dollars on programs that aren't delivering results.